Life in the galaxy had always seemed predictable. Every species kept to its territory, and the powerful ones remained undisputed. But no one had anticipated the arrival of the Urak, a race of ancient conquerors whose reputation for destruction had spread across the stars. They were feared by all, and their technology was far superior to anything humanity had ever encountered. They appeared without warning, crossing the borders of human space and laying waste to colonies with brutal efficiency. In the blink of an eye, entire worlds fell without so much as a fight. But the humans were different. They were not like the other species the Urak had crushed before. Their defiance was not something to be underestimated. When the first Urak fleet arrived, the humans were caught off guard. Their defenses were not prepared for the onslaught the Urak had launched, and for days they watched as their colonies burned under a barrage of weapons. Unlike anything they had seen in their short history, the human leadership gathered in haste as they scrambled to formulate a plan, yet there seemed to be little hope. The Urak's forces were too great, their numbers too overwhelming. It was the end of an era for humanity, or so it seemed. In the chaos of retreat, some human forces made one last stand against the Urak, and surprisingly, they did not fall as expected. A ragtag group of soldiers and civilians made their last desperate attempt to fight back the invaders with whatever means they could find. They had no chance of winning, but they refused to surrender. They built makeshift weapons out of scrap and used their knowledge of the land to their advantage. The Urak were not ready for such unpredictable tactics, and the humans managed to take down a small Urak patrol in a sudden ambush. It was a small victory, a fleeting moment in the grand scale of the war, but it sent a message to the Urak one that they had not considered humans could fight back. No matter the odds, they would not lie down and die without a fight. The Urak leader regarded the report with anger and confusion. How could a race so seemingly inferior dare defy them? It was just the beginning of a war that would change everything. Across the galaxy, news of the human resistance spread like wildfire. Many species watched in awe as humanity displayed an unyielding will to survive and fight back. The whispers began as those who had once viewed humanity as nothing more than a fleeting species began to reconsider their views. Maybe there was something more to humanity than mere survival. Maybe they were more than just a footnote in the galaxy's history. Maybe humanity had the strength to fight for their future. And as the Urak forces pressed forward, they began to notice something they had not anticipated. The humans were not afraid, they were not surrendering, they were learning, they were adapting, and most importantly, they were not backing down. The Urak leader could feel the tide beginning to shift, and a growing unease began to stir within him. The humans had become a force to be reckoned with, and the fear of what they could become started to settle into the hearts of all those who witnessed their resilience. As the Urak pushed deeper into human territory, they expected the resistance to crumble under the weight of their power, but humanity proved to be an unpredictable force. It was in their very nature to adapt and fight back, with a ferocity that few could understand. While the Urak were organized and technologically advanced, humans were scrappy and determined. Driven by necessity, they began to use their greatest advantage, their ingenuity in battle. The Urak were accustomed to fighting species that relied on brute strength or overwhelming numbers, but humanity refused to play by those rules. Instead, they exploited every weakness in the Urak's tactics and technology. With each skirmish, humans learned and adapted. Their soldiers modified their weapons, scavenged enemy tech, and applied their understanding of the terrain in ways that threw the Urak into chaos. Guerrilla warfare became their specialty, hit-and-run tactics that left the invaders baffled. Time and again they would strike when the Urak least expected it and vanish before the enemy could retaliate. Whole battalions of Urak would be wiped out in surprise attacks launched from hidden bases or underground tunnels. The Urak began to feel the sting of these constant ambushes, the realization creeping in that they were no longer fighting an easy war. The first major victory for humanity came on a small but strategically important mining world called Garrix. A world previously thought to be of no value to the Urak suddenly became the stage for one of the most unexpected battles of the war. The human forces stationed there had no hope of winning. Their fleet was vastly outnumbered, their resources limited, but their spirit was unbreakable. Under the command of General Sylvia Harrow, They launched a counteroffensive unlike anything the Urak had ever seen before. They had learned to use the environment to their advantage, knowing that Garrix's dense forests and deep caves would be their only protection. They made it their home field advantage. In the battle for Garrix, humanity's forces used the planet's natural landscape as a weapon as much as their own guns. They laid traps in the forests, used the terrain to hide in plain sight, and used every piece of technology they had managed to scavenge from past battles to strike fear into the Urak. The Urak were caught off guard by the ferocity and cunning of their opponents, and though the Urak had superior firepower, the humans showed them the true cost of underestimating their enemy. In the end, Garrix was saved, and the Urak suffered heavy losses. It was a turning point in the war for both sides. News of the victory spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Humanity had just dealt the Urak their first major defeat, and the ripples of that success reached the ears of many other species. Some who had never believed in humanity's potential now found themselves intrigued by their relentless spirit and tactical brilliance. It wasn't just their will to survive that had won the day, it was their ability to fight smarter, not harder. They were beginning to realize that the humans had a unique quality. They could adapt faster than anyone else, and they could turn the tide of any battle with enough determination. The Urak were forced to reconsider their approach. They had always relied on overwhelming force, but humanity had shown them that sometimes victory was not about brute strength, it was about ingenuity and the will to fight even when it seemed hopeless. And as the Urak commanders argued among themselves about what to do next, one thing became clear: the war was far from over, and humanity was no longer a side to be dismissed. As the war raged on, the unexpected victories and the resilience of humanity began to change the dynamics of the galaxy. The Urak, once believed to be invincible, now faced a growing number of challenges. It wasn't just their own military they had to worry about. The whispers of humanity's successes spread far and wide, reaching the ears of other species, some curious, others fearful. The galaxy, once indifferent to the fate of a small, relatively new species like humanity, was now divided. Among the first to take notice were the Zorak, a formidable and ancient race known for their cunning and ruthlessness. They had long been rivals to the Urak, but their hatred was kept in check by the balance of power in the galaxy. The rise of humanity, however, threatened that balance. The Zorak, ever hungry for power, saw an opportunity in the chaos of war. If humanity were to succeed, their influence would only grow, and the Zorak would have no choice but to either ally with them or oppose them. But aligning with humans seemed too risky. Their unpredictability made them a dangerous ally at best, a deadly enemy at worst. In a quiet corner of the galaxy, the Zorak decided to act. They began to quietly court the remaining Urak forces, offering them technology and resources in exchange for their cooperation. They also sent covert agents to undermine humanity's growing coalition of allies, hoping to sow distrust among them before they could unite against the Urak. Their goal was simple: turn humanity's potential allies into enemies and keep the galaxy fractured. If they could achieve that, they could avoid dealing with humanity's rising power and preserve their own. But the Zorak's schemes were not as clever as they thought. Humanity's resilience in battle was mirrored by their ability to form unexpected alliances. Though their species had never been known for diplomacy, necessity had forced humans to adapt once more. They began reaching out to the species who had previously been at odds with the Urak, offering assistance, protection, and a sense of solidarity in the face of the galactic upheaval. A few species responded to the human overtures, cautiously at first. The Irelith, a highly intelligent and peaceful species, agreed to provide valuable intelligence on the Urak's movements and tactics. The Lithuri, a race of skilled engineers, shared their technological expertise with humanity, helping them upgrade their ships and weapons in record time. These alliances gave humanity access to resources and knowledge they could not have acquired on their own, strengthening their position against the Urak and the growing intrigue of other galactic powers. However, the Zorak's efforts to sabotage these alliances were not without success. They managed to exploit some weaknesses in the human allied ranks, planting seeds of suspicion and fear. Rumors spread that the humans, once the victims of the Uraks' destruction, were now taking the lead in the galaxy's new order. Some factions, especially those with a history of resistance to Urak control, began to question if the humans' rise was one of necessity or ambition. Was humanity truly fighting for survival, or were they positioning themselves as the new power in the galaxy? Tensions mounted as political intrigue and distrust grew between human allies. But it was a turning point, a realization that hit humanity's leadership hard. While the Urak were the immediate threat, the greater danger might lie in the fractures being created within their own coalition. General Harrow, the brilliant strategist behind many of humanity's successes, understood that the war would not be won by firepower alone. The unity of their new alliances was just as important as their military victories, and unless they could keep their coalition intact, they risked falling into the same disunity that had nearly destroyed them in the early days of the war. Meanwhile, the Urak continued to regroup, preparing for their next assault. They had suffered losses, but they were not finished. They had underestimated humanity before, but they had learned their lesson. The Urak would adapt too, and the next phase of the war would be even more brutal than the last. The whispers of humanity's rise were only the beginning. The galaxy was now on the brink of a new order, one that could either collapse under the weight of its own ambition or solidify humanity's place at the top. As the war progressed, humanity's survival was no longer a question. It was their victory that began to seem inevitable. With every battle, they grew stronger, more unified, and more dangerous. They had become masters of the art of war, but not in the traditional sense. They didn't rely on overwhelming firepower, and they didn't march to the same drum as the other galactic powers. Instead, humanity's greatest strength lay in their capacity for innovation and unorthodox strategies that caught the Urak and their allies off guard time and again. The Urak, once the terror of the galaxy, now found themselves struggling to understand the human approach. Their fleets were vast, their technology seemingly invincible, yet humanity's ability to turn any situation to their advantage was unparalleled. What the Urak couldn't fathom was how the humans never stopped adapting. With each victory they learned, and with each loss, they found a new way to fight. The Urak had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. One of humanity's most devastating tactics involved their use of asymmetrical warfare, fighting in ways that relied on surprise, deception, and misdirection. The Urak had relied on predictability, overwhelming firepower, and brute strength. But humanity, through their alliances with the Irelith and Lithari, developed ways to turn the Urak's own advantages against them. One example came in the form of a daring assault on a Urak supply convoy deep within enemy territory. The plan was deceptively simple. Human forces, including a small fleet of fast, agile ships and elite ground operatives, would infiltrate the Urak supply lines and disrupt the critical flow of resources to the front lines. The convoy was protected by a formidable fleet, but humanity's engineers had already developed a cloaking device capable of rendering their ships nearly invisible to the Urak sensors. The convoy moved as expected, and the human force, undetected, struck with surgical precision. In the chaos that followed, the Urak fleet was unable to respond in time, and humanity's forces wiped out the convoy and crippled their supply chain. The Urak had not anticipated a strike so deep within their own territory, and the loss of critical resources forced them to shift their focus away from offensive actions to defending their crumbling supply lines. It was a blow that reverberated across their command, and the psychological impact of this audacious assault was profound. Humanity had taken a page from their playbook. Their ability to turn what seemed like an impossible mission into a triumph of strategy showed that they were no longer the underdogs. They were becoming masters of warfare. Humanity's tactics went beyond just military strategy. They also used psychological warfare to further disrupt their enemies. The Urak, accustomed to using fear as a tool of control, suddenly found themselves on the receiving end of that fear. News of humanity's victory spread like wildfire, and the galaxy began to take notice. Where once humanity had been seen as a species of survival, they were now seen as a species of victory. Their resolve, their capacity for reinvention, and their ability to exploit every possible weakness in their enemies made them an unstoppable force. But with this growing reputation came a new problem. As humanity's military prowess grew, so did their influence. The alliances they had forged with the Irilith, Lithari, and others became stronger, but so did the number of enemies who now saw them as a threat. The Zorak, watching from the sidelines, recognized that humanity's rise could no longer be ignored. They had been biding their time, waiting for the right moment to strike. But for now, the Urak remained their immediate concern, and they too would soon have to decide whether to face humanity directly or risk being caught in the tide of a galaxy reshaped by human ambition. The galaxy's power structure was beginning to shift, and as humanity's reputation as brilliant tacticians and fierce fighters spread, it became clear that no one would be able to avoid their growing influence for long. The Urak, once certain of their dominance, were now faced with an enemy they could no longer underestimate. Humanity had proven itself capable of reshaping the rules of war itself. The question was no longer whether humanity could survive, but whether the galaxy was ready to face a future in which humanity was not just a player, but a ruler. The war had reached a tipping point. Humanity, once considered a minor player in the galactic landscape, had become a force that even the mighty Urak could not ignore. With every battle, the humans adapted, grew stronger, and more audacious. Their victories were no longer just about survival. They were about pushing the boundaries of what was possible. The Urak had underestimated humanity once, and now they were paying the price. But the Urak were not a race to be easily beaten. Despite their losses, their forces remained formidable, and their determination to crush humanity only grew. They were beginning to regroup, to reassess, and to develop new strategies that might counter humanity's growing influence. But humanity had already anticipated this. They knew that the Urak would not take their defeats lying down, and they prepared for the next phase of the war with the same ingenuity that had seen them through the previous battles. The Urak's next move was swift and brutal. They unleashed their most deadly weapon yet, a massive dreadnought that had been kept in reserve for just such an occasion. This ship, known as the Vorak, was designed to decimate entire fleets in a single strike. It was equipped with a weapon that could pierce through even the toughest human defenses, and it was set on a collision course with Earth itself. The Urak believed that if they could destroy humanity's homeworld, they could crush the spirit of resistance once and for all. Humanity's leaders understood the stakes. If the Vorak succeeded, it would not only mean the destruction of Earth, but the collapse of everything they had fought for. But humanity had something the Urak didn't, a capacity to turn the tables in the most impossible of circumstances. General Sylvia Harrow, the mastermind behind many of humanity's greatest victories, was the first to recognize the opportunity hidden in the Urak's overconfidence. The Vorak might be powerful, but it was also vulnerable. Its sheer size made it slow and cumbersome, and while its weapon was powerful, it had a limited range. Harrow devised a plan to lure the dreadnought into a trap, using the same guerrilla tactics that had worked so well in the past. The trap was set. Humanity would draw the Vorak toward a desolate mining world on the edge of human space, a place the Urak would never suspect to be a strategic target. There, they would engage the dreadnought in a series of calculated skirmishes, drawing it into a narrow asteroid field where the Urak's vast weaponry would be rendered less effective. With the help of their alien allies, humanity managed to place hidden mines and powerful EMP devices throughout the field, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the Vorak moved closer, humanity's forces executed their plan with surgical precision. A small fleet of human ships, posing as a retreating force, lured the Urak dreadnought deeper into the asteroid belt. The Vorak took the bait, charging after them with the full weight of its firepower, unaware of the deadly trap lying ahead. At the right moment, the mines were triggered, and an explosion of energy ripped through the Urak fleet. The Vorax shields flickered as EMP blasts disabled its systems, leaving it vulnerable. Human ships, hidden within the asteroid field, surged forward in a coordinated strike. They attacked from every direction, firing their advanced weaponry at the now defenseless dreadnought. It was a perfect execution of strategy, and the Urak had no time to react. Within hours, the Vorak was a smoldering wreck, its massive form floating lifelessly in space. The loss was catastrophic for the Urak, and their morale shattered. This victory, more than any before, sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy. Humanity had destroyed the Urak's most powerful weapon, proving that even the most advanced enemy could be defeated with enough cunning and determination. The Urak, once the dominant force in the galaxy, were no longer untouchable. For the first time, the galaxy saw humanity not as a struggling species on the brink of extinction, but as the architects of their own victory. Yet, the war was far from over. The Urak, though wounded, were not defeated. They regrouped and began plotting their next move. But one thing was certain: humanity's reputation had changed forever. The whispers of their brilliance, their tenacity, and their ability to overcome the impossible were now a constant hum in every corner of the galaxy. The tide had turned, and humanity was now the force everyone had to reckon with. The destruction of the Vorak sent ripples through the entire galaxy. Humanity had struck a blow so significant that even the most entrenched powers in the galaxy had to take notice. The Urak, once thought to be invincible, were now reeling, their most powerful weapon reduced to space debris. But while the Urak were stunned, the galaxy's other factions were far from complacent. Humanity's victory over the Vorak had not only shattered the Urak's resolve, but had also disrupted the delicate power balance between the other species. The Zerek, ever opportunistic, saw the human ascendancy as a threat to their own aspirations. Their clandestine machinations to sow division among humanity's allies were now at a crossroads. The Lithari, Irelith, and other species that had supported humanity thus far were growing more confident in their alliances, and the Zerek realized that their window to manipulate the situation was closing fast. Desperate to avoid a united front of humanity and their allies, the Zarak decided to take a more direct approach. They offered the Urak an ultimatum: join them in an alliance or risk being consumed by humanity's unstoppable momentum. The Zarak understood that the Urak's pride would never allow them to fully submit, but they knew that their shared enemy, the humans, was the real threat. The Zarak's plan was simple. They would supply the Urak with new weapons, tactics, and technology, boosting their strength enough to challenge humanity once more. But the Urak were no fools. Their leadership, now humbled by the loss of the Vorak, was divided. Some leaders sought to continue the fight with the Zarak's help, hoping that a resurgence would restore their former dominance. Others, however, began to see the writing on the wall. They could not defeat humanity with brute force alone. It was time to change their strategy, and they needed new tactics, ones that might draw humanity into a war of attrition rather than a war of innovation. While the Urak leadership bickered, humanity was not standing still. The generals and leaders who had seen victory after victory knew that this moment could not be squandered. The destruction of the Vorak had given them a tactical advantage, but it had not yet secured the war. Humanity's leaders, led by General Sylvia Harrow, realized that the key to their continued success lay in maintaining the unity of their alliances and pushing the Urak and their would-be allies into an untenable position. The first step was diplomacy. Humanity's representatives, led by Ambassador Orion Creel, began to tour the galaxy, meeting with neutral factions and even the more distant races who had remained silent until now. Humanity had built its reputation on cunning tactics and indomitable spirit, but now they needed to prove they could offer more. They offered peace and mutual protection, not just against the Urak, but against any power that sought to disrupt the galaxy's fragile balance. The Lithari and Irelith, who had already shared a bond with humanity, were the first to formalize their alliances. But it was the Seraphine, a species long considered too remote and isolated to be part of galactic politics, that offered a game-changing proposal. The Seraphine, known for their advanced psychic abilities and command over energy fields, saw humanity's potential as the keystone for a new order. They pledged to join the human cause, offering their vast psychic knowledge and technology to bolster humanity's standing. The Seraphine's influence was not to be underestimated. Their support meant the difference between surviving the war and winning it. The Uruk, meanwhile, were not idle. Their alliance with the Zerak began to take shape, but it was tenuous at best. There was no trust between the two factions, only a shared goal: defeat humanity before they could truly establish dominance. The Zorak, calculating as ever, offered the Uruk powerful new weapons and a direct assault plan that targeted humanity's weakest points. They believed that a quick, devastating strike would disrupt humanity's alliances and force them to retreat. But in the heart of humanity's forces, a quiet resolve began to grow. General Harrow and Ambassador Creel were not only thinking of military victories, they were thinking of what came after. If humanity was to rise as the new power in the galaxy, they had to prove themselves worthy not just in battle, but as a force for peace and stability. Every species humanity had allied with understood that this war was more than just a fight for survival. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy, and humanity was determined to shape that future on their own terms. Yet the Uruk, with their relentless drive, would not give up easily. They were preparing for their final push, a push that would test humanity's resolve more than ever before. And the Zarak, always scheming, were ready to throw the dice once more, betting on the chaos that would follow. The galaxy was on the cusp of a new chapter, and whether it would be a new dawn for humanity or the end of their dreams depended on the next move. The galaxy was on the brink. Humanity's rise had set the entire balance of power teetering. Their unexpected victories had left the Uruk wounded, but the invaders were far from finished. The Zarak, ever calculating, had joined forces with the Uruk, breathing new life into their ambitions. However, their fragile alliance was built on mutual need rather than trust, and the growing discontent between the two factions was evident. For all their might, neither could fully comprehend humanity's resolve or the bonds they had formed with their new allies. With the Vorak destroyed, humanity knew the next phase of the war would be a fight for survival. General Sylvia Harrow had made it clear to her commanders. This wasn't just about holding back the Uruk anymore. It was about defining what the future of the galaxy would look like. The alliances they had forged with species like the Irolith, Lithari, and Seraphine were vital, but the human spirit, their unyielding ability to adapt and innovate, was their greatest weapon. They had won battles, but this would be the final one. A war to decide whether humanity would rise to rule or be wiped out by the might of those who had once underestimated them. The Uruk and Zarak, sensing the growing momentum of humanity's coalition, began to prepare for a full-scale, all-out assault. They knew they had to strike before humanity could consolidate its power. They launched their assault in a coordinated blitzkrieg, targeting critical human strongholds scattered across human-controlled space. Entire fleets, led by the remnants of the Vorak-class warships, rained down devastation on humanity's outer worlds. But this time, the Uruk made one critical mistake. They underestimated humanity's ability to turn the tide at the most dire of moments. On the front lines, humanity's forces were stretched thin. The human fleet, though bolstered by their allies, could not match the sheer numbers of the Uruk and Zorak war machines. The galaxy's war-weary soldiers, from all races, had to come together and fight not just for survival, but for the hope of a better tomorrow. The battle for the human capital planet, Earth, was shaping up to be a decisive moment in history. General Harrow, though exhausted from years of war, stood unwavering at the helm of the defensive operations. Her strategies, once celebrated as acts of brilliance, now felt more like desperate measures. Still, She knew that humanity's greatest strength lay not in their fleets or weapons, but in their ability to endure the impossible. They had learned to fight dirty, adapt quickly, and strike decisively when all seemed lost. The enemy might have overwhelming power, but humanity had the will to win. On Earth, the human military command had set up a trap, a final gambit. They knew that the Urak and Zarak, desperate for a decisive victory, would focus all their resources on Earth. Harrow authorized the deployment of an experimental weapon developed by the Lithari engineers and Seraphine psychers, a weapon capable of disrupting entire fleets by manipulating the fabric of space itself. This weapon was humanity's ace in the hole, and its activation would either be their salvation or their doom. The battle raged for days, with humanity's ships giving their all, holding off wave after wave of enemy forces. The Urak's dreadnoughts, the Zarak's cunning tactics, and the sheer weight of their numbers seemed like an unstoppable force. But then, just as the enemy fleets began to close in on Earth's orbital defense grid, humanity made its move. The experimental weapon activated, sending out a shockwave that destabilized the gravitational field surrounding the enemy fleets. Ships veered off course, and in the chaos, entire fleets were pulled into the unstable gravity wells. Urak and Zarak ships collided with each other, while others were sent spiraling into the depths of space. The devastation was catastrophic for the Urak-Zarak coalition. Their fleets, once considered invincible, were now in disarray. The combined forces of humanity's fleet, bolstered by the Seraphine's psychic energy and the Lithari's technological prowess, launched their final offensive. The remaining Urak forces fought fiercely, but they were demoralized and fragmented. The Zarak, seeing their once allies retreat, pulled back as well, not willing to risk further losses. As the dust settled, humanity stood victorious. Earth remained intact, and for the first time in years, the war had shifted in their favor. The Urak had been forced to retreat, and their once feared fleets were now scattered and broken. The Zarak, while not fully defeated, knew they had to reassess their place in the galaxy. Humanity's relentless drive had shaken them, and the balance of power had shifted irrevocably. But victory was bittersweet. The war had cost humanity much, and the future of the galaxy was far from certain. The Zarak might retreat for now, but they would not forget the threat humanity posed. And though the Urak had been beaten back, their influence was still felt in many corners of the galaxy. Humanity had proven that they could win, but the true challenge now lay in what came next. Could they rebuild? Could they keep their hard-won alliances intact and establish peace? Or would the scars of war and the shifting tides of galactic politics tear apart what they had fought so hard to build? The dust of battle had barely settled when the true weight of humanity's victory began to sink in. Earth was still standing, its surface scarred but not broken, and the Urak had been pushed to the edge of extinction. But the cost had been high. The war had drained humanity's resources, shattered countless worlds, and left scars that would last for generations. The Zarak, though temporarily defeated, had slinked away to their corners of the galaxy, regrouping and licking their wounds. But they had seen humanity's true potential, and it was only a matter of time before they would challenge again. In the aftermath, as the galaxy attempted to rebuild, General Sylvia Harrow stood before the United Coalition Assembly, her face weary but resolute. The members of the Assembly, representing the various species that had allied with humanity, sat in somber silence. There were no wild celebrations, no loud cheers. The war had taken too much for anyone to feel truly victorious. The galaxy had been ravaged by bloodshed and fear, and rebuilding was a monumental task that stretched beyond the capacity of any one species or alliance. Harrow's voice broke the silence. "We've won a great victory," she said, her tone firm yet somber. "But our fight has only just begun. The galaxy is broken, divided by old grudges and new fears. The Urak may be retreating for now, but the Zarak remain a threat. And we cannot forget the others who watched from the sidelines, waiting for their moment to strike." She paused, looking around the room at the faces of her allies, some hopeful, others skeptical. The Lithari, known for their engineering prowess, the Irilith, who had provided invaluable intelligence, the Seraphine, whose psychic energy had been key to humanity's final victory, and even the once neutral factions that had lent their support. The wounds of the war were still fresh, but Harrow saw a glimmer of something in their eyes, an understanding that humanity's actions had brought them all together. They had fought as one, and now they would have to rebuild as one. The question before us, Harrow continued, is whether we can create a new galaxy, one not built on conquest, not ruled by fear or power, but one where we can coexist. The Gorak and Zarak will not be the last threats we face. We must build something more enduring than mere survival. We must forge a future where peace isn't a fragile illusion, but a reality we fight for every day. Her word hung in the air, and for the first time since the war began, the assembly seemed united in a single purpose. There was no easy path forward, no guarantees, but humanity had shown them all what it meant to fight for something greater than themselves. In the months that followed, the coalition of species that had fought alongside humanity began the long process of rebuilding the fractured galaxy. The Urak, battered and broken, retreated to their distant homeworld, licking their wounds and dealing with internal divisions. The Zarak, ever calculating, had pulled back, but their spies and scheming would continue to stir the pot in the shadows. Humanity knew this. There would be no true peace as long as old powers and old enemies lurked in the corners of the galaxy. Yet, humanity had emerged as the new focal point of galactic politics. Their alliances had solidified into a powerful coalition, one that was determined to rebuild the galaxy in a way that honored unity, diversity, and peace. They used the very same ingenuity and adaptability that had won them the war to establish a network of trade, technology sharing, and joint defense. The Irilith's intelligence capabilities, the Lithari's engineering, the Seraphine's psychic abilities, and humanity's tactical brilliance created a force that no single species could stand against. But even as the galaxy began to rebuild, General Harrow knew that their victory was not just about defeating an enemy. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity's survival was not some random stroke of luck. It was the result of their unyielding will to persevere, their refusal to accept defeat, and their ability to adapt to any challenge thrown their way. The war had been a crucible, and humanity had emerged stronger, united, and more capable than ever before. The galaxy would never forget the name of humanity, but it no longer whispered in fear. Now, it spoke with respect. No longer just survivors, humanity had earned their place in the stars. They had become the guardians of a new order. As Harrow stood on the balcony overlooking the city of New Dawn, the first city to rise from the ashes of the war, she saw the horizon bright with possibility. The sun rose over a galaxy forever changed. Humanity had proven their worth, not just through victory, but through their unwavering determination to ensure that peace, once so fragile, would last. The whispers of humanity's name no longer echoed in fear. They now reverberated with hope.